Gracias a ustedes por la invitación de estar hoy día. Thank you for having me here in this conversation. I have a difficult task, which is try to have a general idea of what we are trying to communicate here, which is a lot of different ideas. Is a way of thinking and a way of doing to change ourselves. So I have some questions here, and I really want you to be part of this conversation. We probably will open the conversation in a few minutes. Maybe you don't know what are we doing here, so I would like to start to this concept of the being framework. It's not an easy thing to comprehend. So, what is?
Thank you very much for hosting this, and thank you very much to Juan Carlos. So, the idea of the being framework is, if you want to keep it as simple as possible, is there are some deep qualities when it comes to human beings. Now, often in conventional ways of thinking about human beings, especially nowadays, we pay a lot of attention to the surface level qualities. For example, behavior or thoughts, feelings, emotions that are extremely important. But at the end of the day, there are certain qualities down deep there that they drive those manifestations. The way that we relate to any of these qualities, things like authenticity, things like responsibility, autonomy, assertiveness, compassion, and the list goes on, at the end of the day, manifest itself in our behavior and decisions, what is visible. So the idea of the being framework is actually encouraging us to look into these deeper qualities and not just focusing on the peak of the iceberg.
Are they connected always? Because sometimes we have some inner qualities that are kind of different that the character that we show outside. So, are they connected, and how can we connect them? Which is not the same.
So that's a very, very good question, because like one of the things that in the philosophical side to this body of work is being articulated, because there's the practical element to it. That was my commitment from the get-go. But that practical side resides on top of the philosophical underpinning. So one of the important distinction in this body of work is I've separated the whatness of human beings from the howness of human being, and then also from the who-ness of human beings. Now, it's quite common, even amongst the renowned thinkers, that we collapse these. So when I talk about what we are being, we're talking about the qualities that every human being share. So there's not a single human being that can say, I don't relate to fear at all. I don't relate to anxiety. I don't relate to autonomy, because we are dealing with these qualities on a daily basis. We experience fear, we experience anxiety, we tap into our autonomy any moment that we're choosing between this and that. So, but when it comes to howness, it's like how we relate to these different qualities. So when it comes to whatness, our nature, our essence is the same thing. And we are of the same root. That's why we are the same species. Like we have these characters, like we correspond in character and kind. So, but when it comes to howness, is like how you as an individual may relate to each and every of these qualities, and that's a kind of a spectrum. So, and that becomes a bit more phenomenological, or the human experiences, rather than the pure ontological conversation, which focuses on the whatness, the nature, the essence, what to be our being, what constitutes being a human being. So therefore, this ontology and phenomenology are going hand in hand here, but I separated them so that we don't collapse. So if I relate to fear differently, I'm not fundamentally different to you. It's just like I relate to it differently due to my different upbringing, due to cultural norms, the social pressures, and on my innate temperament to some extent. But the good news is the moment that we separate these two, first, we know that we're not fundamentally different entities, and it brings that connectedness. Uh, Also, then it'll help us to focus on transformability. We know that we can transform. We can transform the way that we relate to fear, anxiety, and so on. Yeah, and then I talk about who-ness separately if you think that that's going to be useful. Yeah.
If you want to talk about it right now, you can do that.
Well,
I mean, it's your book.
Sure. So yeah, that's actually quite important nowadays because like we're dealing with things like identity politics, categorizing people in various different categories. Now, not only in the society, in dealing with societal matters, but also in organizations. Like you see that in the name of diversity, inclusion, um, as far as I really support diversity and inclusion, the thing is, ironically, sometimes we end up categorizing people in different categories and creating these exclusive groups. And then we want to equate the condition and opportunities and sometimes outcome for them, which mathematically is impossible. So, as far as I'm for the cause, from a philosophical perspective, but I think that um, focusing so much on categorizing people and that's going to be
Creates
troublesome.
fragmentation.
Exactly. So when we talk about who-ness, then yes, we have our whatness. We discussed it, our nature, essence. Talked about how we relate to things. Yeah. And when it comes to who-ness, is the collection of labels that at the end of the day we're going to associate to ourselves, and we choose them, and we let our different preferences sometimes to define us. Yeah.
I want to make a little stop in a way that you refer to fear, and you say this kind of qualities. We never speak about fear in terms of a quality. So, and other things that you said. So, why do you think that fear could be a quality?
Yeah, so I know that it's quite conventional for us to think that the fear is something with a
Wrong.
kind of a negative connotation. Yeah, so you should be fearless. Sometimes when we talk about courage or bravery, we imagine a person who doesn't have any fear. Yeah, but that's a very sentimental view. Yeah, that's not realistic. At the end of the day, we all human beings, we relate to fear, and then sometimes the fear is a really good thing because, see, for example, at certain age, a human being is going to develop this sense that there is height here, you know, the sense of height, and that's going to protect us not to fall from a cliff. Yeah. So yeah, what I've done with this body of work and is I try to pull out value or judgment out from it. Therefore, like this is not about morality. This is not. I would say it's non-judgmental. Yeah. So we don't want to think like when we talk about authenticity. Let's say we say being authentic is a moral thing or is an immoral thing. Now that doesn't mean that I don't have any interest in ethics. But this book is not all of me. Yeah. So this framework, this discourse, is designed to be in such a way that most different people, most of the people can actually relate to, no matter which religion they're coming from or which ideology they have at the end of the day. So yeah, so I see them as qualities that you can have healthy or unhealthy relationship with them. Yeah.
No, I thought it was super interesting because finally it hides something that you also remark a lot in your book, which is the role of the shadows. I mean, and I have had the experience of enjoy and discovering and exploring the world because of these kind of qualities, like fear. And I think that everybody lives like that, no? So I would like to go to your triangle, the exposure triangle. What it is it, and what is it, and how it works? And I have more questions when you explain it.
Sure. So the exposure triangle was not there from the get-go when I originally wrote Being book, which was heavier book than this, and that's extremely important to refer to that if someone really wants to jump into it after this book. But so that was not originally there. The way that I came up with that and leveraged that analogy was looking into the empirical data that we have gathered through the Being profile, our ontometric assessment tool that basically measures one's relationship with all of these aspects of being. And we realized that there's these three particular aspects of being. They play a very, very major role in how we start understanding or making sense of things. And we realize that unless we address them to a degree, it's really hard to go and address other aspects of me. Yeah. So because one of the questions that often comes up is like, what is your favorite, or like which ones you think that are more important, and that's a fundamental.
But can you name the three
Of
parts
course,
of
of
the
course,
triangle?
yeah, yeah. So the first one is awareness, or how we relate to intentional consciousness. And the second one is authenticity. Now, when we talk about authenticity, we don't mean how genuine something is. That's one of the conventional meanings of authenticity. We mean to what extent your conceptions of different fragments of reality is congruent with how things actually are. And the next one is vulnerability. Yeah, the simple translation of that would be openness. Yeah, but vulnerability is more than openness. So similar to cameras, when we look at something and we are constantly taking snapshots of reality, we want to observe and make sense of things. How we relate to our consciousness or intentional consciousness matters. Are we going to collapse if we don't understand something? If you don't know something and you're trying to engage in that activity, for example, you're starting a new musical instrument, or in the corporate world, you're trying to learn these new skills that you need. Yeah, so it's software that you need to learn how to use it, and how you're going to relate to that. If you don't know it, are you going to collapse? Are you going to freak out? Or are you going to dare to jump in and try to get the best understanding that you can? Yeah. So that's basically part of our relationship with awareness. Similar to cameras will have aperture, one of the major configuration. It's like to what extent you're going to let the light in. Yeah. And another one is vulnerability. Like vulnerability is more like the shutter speed in cameras. It's like to what extent you're happy to keep the shutter open so that it can observe and take most of the send out this um, basically to observe whatever is there. Yeah. So for example, if you're taking photo of the moon at night when there's a low light condition, very likely you want to keep the um, shutter open as long as possible so that you can get the picture. So that analogy is like us human beings, we can have moments of lack of vulnerability when we take our guards up and we reject new knowledge or new perspectives or observing things differently. Yeah. And authenticity is more like how sensitive your lens is to the light. Yeah. Yes, you don't know something, you're trying to understand it, but how to what extent validity of your opinions and beliefs are important to you. Are you going to be fickle? Are you going to be lenient? You just like accept whatever the news says, or you actually rigorously you put certain things in place so that with critical thinking, conducting some sort of meta-analysis, trying to understand different perspectives and different perceptions of that, and then you shape your views. So yeah, so these are like the three major qualities that I use the analogy of the camera, and I call them the exposure triangle.
I think it's interesting. I wanted to take you to this point because you read the titles and you imagine something and it's not. So that's interesting because it's like you have to reconnect the ideas of your language to re-understand this methodology. I would say, and I thought it was really interesting because it challenged you like in a double way because you have to relearn vocabulary and also to relearn how to approach to reality. But something that happens to me listening to you was, okay, when do I know that I am really in contact with something like the truth? Because authenticity is like trying to be more objective or to challenge you to have an uncovered truth, no? And vulnerability opens you to see something, and awareness also helps in that way. But when do I know that I have find something, in this path? And that's interesting, don't you think? Like, when do I know that I find something important for me?
Yeah, so first let me quickly address like when you talked about like the terminologies that are used, that is quite common. Like anyone who is familiar with the work of many philosophers, they know that a philosopher, a thinker, would be limited by the structure or the existing vocabulary in a language. So it is quite common that you end up creating new words, or you use the existing word quite differently, but then you create distinction. Yeah. And there's numerous examples of that. Let's say, for example, Jacques Derrida, the postmodern philosopher, would use words like difference, yeah, and that's not a typical way that you would use that. Or, for example, the idea behind deconstruction in language and making sense of text or interpretation. Or Martin Heidegger, like, is famous for creating lots of words. So I've tried to be very cautious, especially with this body of work, because this is not a purely philosophical work. It is built on top of the philosophy that as I'm working on it, but it is not designed to be a philosophical book in a sense that like certain intellectuals only would be able to interact with it. So therefore, I've tried to avoid creating lots of new words in the being discourse, but the way that the keywords are being used are not very conventional. I understand that, and I don't dare to define or redefine these words, but that's why we use the term distinction. So any of these keywords, they have distinctions, which are in the book. And I'm not making anyone wrong. I'm saying that this is what we're talking about in this discourse, in this framework. This is what gets measured, for example, when we use our ontometric tool. So that's like the first question you brought up. Now, so when it comes to us knowing that, when is it that you know that you got it? Yeah, well, the simple answer
Or
to that.
something, a little piece of it.
Okay, good.
I mean, something.
This is a better one, yeah? It's much easier to handle this question. Because see, sometimes when we talk about authenticity, some I've realized they get very triggered. Again, like we're talking about this objective reality. Certain people say, oh, there's no objective reality. Certain people say everything is construct, and there are different views philosophically speaking, and these philosophies influence the way that people think. But and for example, like in certain academic settings. So I had the experience of the moment you start talking about truth, truth is being seen as a very radical conservative construct. Yeah. So I get the
Idea.
thing, right? Yeah, but at the same time, it's like I'm not saying at all that like we have all the truth in our both hands.
I know.
Yeah, so the simple answer to that is like we never may know certain parts of the truth. The idea is this is not binary. This is not zero or one. As you mentioned, knowing something is better than knowing nothing. Yeah, and there are epistemological ways for us to examine different fragments of reality. When it comes to, for example, material reality, we have developed scientific ways of thinking that they can be extremely helpful and in certain aspects quite reliable. But science is not the only way to examine realities. For some part of reality, as I described it in the book, I call them second layer reality, that we create construct, we create institutions on top of our existing intellectual substrate. We create constructs like human right. We talk about women's right. We talk about many of these constructs of freedom. Yeah, right it on itself. Yeah, sometimes we talk about right as if like we're talking about something like oxygen that it just exists. Yeah, um, uh, and also we create institutions like government bodies or banking system and many of these different systems that we work with. So the idea is, especially when it comes to certain construct that we have created them, the man-made, for example, money, fiat currency. We created it. There's so much information available about it. So we should perhaps, if we want to be effective in our financial endeavors, it's a really good idea to actually deeply understand it. Yeah. And now, if you're bringing questions up like what will happen after life, that's going to be way harder for us to discuss that or negotiate that. Yeah. So the idea is like we are confused and we are living in this mismatch of um, clouded, foggy environment of knowing things. My encouragement is like if we can know something about something, let's be authentic and not fool ourselves. So the main point is there are certain things that we have created them. We should be able to deeply understand them. Yeah. While there are certain other things that we may not be able to. So tapping into various different forms of ways of examining different parts of reality, tapping into language, leveraging um, uh, logical reasoning, coming to consensus around things, dialectic, going through dialogues. And there's so many different ways that we can sit there and we can discuss things. So yeah, so not every idea or concept is going to be as straightforward as like tapping into science or taking scientific exact science approach. But yeah, so basically there are multiple different ways, and a person who has a healthy relationship with authenticity and awareness in the context of this book would be a person who wouldn't be lenient and just take whatever and shape whatever opinions. They'll try to look into multiple different perspectives. You look into multiple different perceptions of the same idea. They try to look into different narratives that exist and like what the left wing news would say about this event, what the right wing would say, and try to find the truth, like demystify that. And normally the truth is somewhere between. Yeah. So this is basically what I discuss in the book.
Something interesting is that um, it looks like a very philosophical work and it looks hard. And when we try to take this to our institutions or organizations, it looks like something that only wise people can have, can do in a crystal place in some mountain. We have a lot of them, but so how can this frame really? How could this frame really help to common, ordinary people like me or every institution that we have there? Because we have this terrible task of changing the world, or at least we are in this task together. I feel, and how can this frame connect with this mission? And be very concrete in an organization.
So basically, I know that we're launching the book in Spanish just now. This book was launched over 2 years ago, and so we don't necessarily need to have hypothetical conversation. We have actually produced the results, and
Great.
There are a good number of organizations of various different size. They are leveraging the tools, leveraging the framework, and not only that, we do have the coach academy that train coaches so that they can leverage this and go out there and then work with people. So therefore, I would say we've been successful, very successful in um, giving access to various different people, from leaders to so that's just there, yeah. But so when you say ordinary people, I mean, what do you exactly mean? What are the factors that put someone in that category? I think that some of us are more intellectually, when by intellectual, I don't mean necessarily philosophy, yeah. Whatever has to do with our intellect, yeah. Some of us may be more engaged and leverage our intellect. We do more exercise, and some less, like similar to exercise to keep your physical health. I don't think that there's many people out there that are incapable of dealing with particularly this body of work, yeah. And the thing is, my intention was not to make it philosophical in a sense that, okay, so let's intellectualize the word, and that was not the idea. I actually think that I am one of the rare people in this realm of philosophy that I deeply have the concern that I want these bodies of work being understood by people. So I know that certain very renowned thinkers and philosophers in the history, they perhaps didn't have that concern. Yeah. And that's why many still find reading their text quite hard and heavy. Now, I do have some other work that are more philosophical, more like the prequel to this discourse, but the beingless course, and particularly the human being book, is designed to connect with everyone, yeah, most people. Now, one more thing I have to say about that. See, sometimes it happens that I hear people come to me and say, "Oh, this is so hard and complex." The thing is, life is complex. It's not like me making this complex.
And I'm part of life, you said.
Yes, yeah. So life is complex, and we are all part of life. And yes, like life brings us matters that we don't understand. We're vulnerable. We're vulnerable, truly vulnerable, because we don't understand everything. And in life, sometimes even harshly demand us to know stuff that it didn't come like an instruction manual, like when we are thrown into this world. So, and that's exactly why my commitment was and still is to encapsulate some good part of this complexity. So actually, by giving you just the ontological model, basically ontological model is a fancy term for series of qualities like being put in a kind of a model. Yeah. So just giving you that access is like in the middle of this. Imagine that your kitchen doesn't have any closet or any drawer or anything. Everything is just like flat on the ground. So you're going to find it much harder to navigate and try to find things to make some omelets. Yeah. So the idea is like to give you that ontological model, give you a structured way,
Yeah.
not very detailed because we don't want to control the way that the person thinks, it provides a kind of a structure to make your life easier so that you know where to look at. For example, with the being profile that goes hand in hand with the whole framework, it's like you get to measure the health of your relationship or how you relate to these qualities. And that way you can see your blind spots. And then you can then yourself, or ideally with the help of a practitioner who's trained rigorously in the work, then you can actually contextualize that and then see, okay, so what does this mean that I don't have a relatively healthy relationship with responsibility? Am I living life from this viewpoint that I'm a passive victim and life is purely occurring to me? Or no, I am an active agent, that I have a say. I can find the tiniest thread of a string and pull it when life brings these matters to me. I know that I'm not the source of everything, but I am to respond, and hopefully I respond appropriately. Like famously, Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, existentialist philosopher, says we are in a terrifying manner free. Yeah, because freedom traditionally has been seen as this glorified thing that you go in and fight for. But the moment that you realize that you are free and you are to make decisions, then you see that, oh, you can paralyze you. It's really hard. You get to these, there are lots of dilemmas and doubts and hesitations you need to deal with. So therefore, yeah, if you identify that you're not necessarily having a healthy relationship with freedom or autonomy or responsibility, as I call it, then at least you know where to look at. Yeah. So therefore, just to wrap it up here in this, yeah, I try to encapsulate some good part of this complexity, and I think that in great part we have really good responses, like people are connecting to the work. Um, yeah, but at the same time, I would say that this is not something that some book that you would pick it up and just read through whole thing like over a flight, and
En el metro.
you get something, you get some good understanding, I would say, but this is something to then go back and try to conceive it better and understand and practice its methodology, and yeah.
I don't know. I have my watch here. Do I have to cut?
If you want, it's a good conversation. I say that you have 10 minutes,
Okay.
and then maybe
Okay, yeah, I have one more question. You can interrupt me. Sometimes I don't have great questions, but you just say when we're not too many, so we can share this task. I'm interested on some of the qualities you describe. We have this book, and we have a moment to talk about awareness, integrity, effectiveness, vulnerability, care, fear and anxiety, authenticity, responsibility, freedom, courage, and so on. But are some of them are very important for me. So I'm doing the questions. I'm gonna ask for them. And I think we are living in a very difficult society where the idea of me is kind of simple. I can imagine that. But the idea of us is not that simple. So I would like to know more about your approach to care. Is this, how do you think, how important do you think it is? Are we in a care crisis? And how can we awake care on us?
Mm, yeah. So I adopted care or Sorg from Martin Heidegger, mainly his main body of work in Being and Time. So when we talk about care, we're not necessarily just talking about an altruistic view as we live. Yeah, it's not just being kind. I'm not saying that being kind is not important. What I'm saying is we're not just talking about being kind and altruistic. Yeah, care plays a very, very serious role in our life. For example, it manifests itself in our prioritization process. And if we want to be a little bit more philosophical here, so one of the major areas that I have a keen interest in is axiology, or the study of value, what you find more valuable than others. Yeah? And we all deal with that, even if you're not familiar with that fancy term. On a daily basis, you keep prioritizing this over that, and what to eat, what not to eat, what to do and what not to do. Because the moment that you choose to dedicate yourself to one thing, see, I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you, that means that I can't at the same time talk to some other people. So there's always a kind of a cost or consequences to the choices that we make. And life at the end of the day is this, the quality of our life in great part is going to be determined by the aggregation of these small decisions that we make. It happens a lot that when we're discussing coaching and like you see that two people are arguing all the time, whether they're in intimate relationship or in organizations like business partners or colleagues. They go to, oh, like this other person always just bring these little things, and like these are not very important. I mean, life is all about these little things. So when it comes to care, care manifests itself in many different areas of our life individually. Yeah. So, for example, would you prioritize your health over the pleasure of, for example, like drinking lots of alcohol, let's say? Yeah. So you want to always like look into that. Or, for example, you want to be dealing with the pain of waking up in the morning and going to the gym, or you're choosing to be dealing with the pain of potentially getting diabetes. Yeah. So now, in a larger scale, which is my concern, is um, I'm quite present to the social disintegration we see in many different societies, and like I know a little bit about the political context, for example, cultural context in Chile as well. So you see that there are common pseudo dialogues, polarizing pseudo dialogues going on. And many of these are leading the world to be divided. And actually, many renowned thinkers, they actively, whether consciously or unconsciously, keep fueling that. Because sometimes these intellectual debates are not going to stay in academic environments or intellectual places. It gets misunderstood or interpreted in this way and that way, and it's going to be taken to the streets, and it can lead to civil wars, it can lead to blood being shed. So it gets very serious. Now, care, at the end of the day, goes back um, to what extent you choose to associate importance to this thing over another thing. Yeah. So, and it manifests itself in multiple different, more tangible qualities. That's why it's a mood in the book. The moods are, or the state of mind, we can say mode of a state of mind, are the primal ways that we disclose ourselves to the world and we interact through them. It's like sitting in the background. So therefore, as a mood, care is going to have a relationship with responsibility, with courage, with all of these other qualities. For example, if you take a mother bear, if you get in her way and her cubs, then the level of care is going to impact her courage to do whatever it takes, yeah, to step ahead despite the presence of fear. So it's so primal that, as I just mentioned, like it's even, you can even see that in animals, let alone human beings. So yeah, so it manifests itself in all of these other more tangible primary ways of being, as I call them, or secondary ways of being, and in our behaviors. Yeah.
I would like to tell, or I choose my qualities, and I choose those that are trying to connect us. For example, gratitude and love, and all of them are very nice, but are part of the structure of being human. So, how do you think we can find a quality, a social quality, as a group, not just as a person? I mean, what kind of quality should we try to spread on this society to rebuild the connections and the bonds in this time?
So let me zoom out a little bit, because so when we say this is a framework, it means that it's a series of generic principles and practices and so on. I understand your question is quite specific with regards to like what can help people get connected a bit more. But first, I would like to address this thing on a larger scale and zoom out. At the end of the day, the smallest unit of any society is individuals, like people, like a person. And then you have like families and you have communities. And now, when we talk about organization, I don't necessarily talk about organization in a conventional sense, like this corporate. No, a team is an organization. It's an organized group of people that they have a particular mission and they're trying to fulfill a vision. So, so I think that let me bring this thing up. I think is going to be very useful in this conversation. So in the book, I talk about the fulfillment pyramid. At the end of the day, we know from a phenomenological perspective, looking into the common human experiences, we all want something. We care about something, and we care about different things in different stages in our life. And I'm not saying that we all care about the exact same things, but you have something that you care so much about, yeah, and it may be more than one thing. Now, there's also this other common human experience that when you care about something, you so want it to be fulfilled. And now you may ask me why. Let's not even go there, yeah? So we all have something we care about. We all almost have this experience that when we care about something, some intention that we have, some objective, some goal, we so want it to be fulfilled. Now, the idea is like in order for us to fulfill the very things that we so care about, we need to be integrous. We need to have these different bits and pieces in the puzzle together so that like any other system, we can operate. Yeah. So if there's any missing parts in the system is going to not perform in an optimal level. And that's the whole idea behind integrity. Yeah. Now, so in order for us to fulfill the things that we so want, we want to become aware of them first, and then we want to look into our integrity, the constituent parts, and identify the things that are getting in the way of that integrity. And why do you want the integrity? One of the major result of integrity is effectiveness, because we don't want to deal with dysfunction. We want to be effective in fulfillment of the intention we so care about. Yeah. So now, if you take that as the context of the conversation, it's like in order for us to be effective in addressing the integrity of both individuals and the societies or organizations, we need all of these qualities. That's the whole point of the book. So I don't necessarily have a favorite one. Yeah, we I was quite careful not to create so many different qualities, because if you end up having so many different qualities, like it's like counter. How can I say? It's like there's no point. Like if nothing would be like everything. Yeah, so everything would be like nothing. And the idea was to only identify the ones through analytical thinking that are extremely important. And when I've studied over 300 highest achievers, as I call them, the leaders that are being effective. Now, we may not like their intentions. We may not agree with them. I haven't assessed them from a benevolent perspective. Even if they wanted to do some evil thing, they've been, succeeding in that. Now, so I've seen the patterns that convinced me that these are the qualities that matter, and I could see that those qualities, they're, like they all had it in common. So yeah.
I don't know. See if anybody has any question here. Well, let's go to right to the end then. I'm interested on this idea of being someone who is unpolished. It's a beautiful idea for ourselves, and maybe we can be together in that point, all together, very happy and polished people. And what's the final goal? I have had so many conversations with thinkers and philosophers, and I always try to do this question because it's good for the common people like me, which is what's the final point, and what's your blind spot, and so what's next for you, not just for us, which we will start from the first page, so we have a lot to do, but what's the final point until now for you?
Yeah. Okay, so we can talk a lot about that, and I'm happy to be as transparent as possible. The thing is, like, as far as our time allows us. So the ultimate goal here is, see, Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, depict this picture of eudaimonia, like some people will be familiar with that, or eudaimonic well-being. And so the thing is, we want to be well, yeah. And I'm saying I'm de-intellectualizing this as much as possible. We want to be well. I don't say happy, peaceful. I say well. Yeah, it's our well-being. And when I say polished, see, we don't have this idealistic vision of becoming perfect. We can't, because we can't be perfect. But that should not perhaps lead us to succumb to the darkness of our imperfections. Again, it's not 0 and 1. So a person who takes thrive strategy in life is like they're actively and vulnerably, they're trying to identify the parts within them that are causing trouble, are causing suffering for themselves, unnecessary suffering for themselves, and suffering for others. And the moment that you start identifying them, and you get accustomed to the joy that comes from polishing yourself, in a sense. So the idea is not to be perfect, but is to go towards perfection the way that you can conceive it. So that's basically what I would like us to see, because there's so much dysfunction, there's so much inauthenticities. We don't have the perfect systems, but instead of going and criticizing these systems, I mean, by training, I'm a system designer, like some people don't know. But the irony is, yes, we can go and then be activists and want to change systems. The idea is, who are going to be the one who are designing those systems? Because like we can build a system as good as how we are, and so we need people we need more polished people to design more polished system. And then at the end of the day, it's us human beings who implement those systems. We follow those systems. We respect those systems. So therefore, I would say the solution to most of our human problems lays upon the integrity of individuals. That's why it's so important for me to support individuals, support teams to grow. Yeah. Now, another thing is like we don't want to completely get rid of the shadow. That's not the idea. It's the matter of integration. It's the matter of like most Polish people that I have seen in my life are the people that they have enough room for all these paradoxical things in within them. So they have room for jealousy, and they have room for honesty, and they have room for. Now that doesn't mean that I'm saying that you just need to justify whatever possibly negative quality that you would see within you, but to actually come in peace and be with them, be okay with being
Watch
under,
them.
watch them exactly, yeah, and to whatever extent that you can address them, you can do it. So going to the next question that you brought up is, so obviously, like some people may know that I've just released another book called Meta Content. And we don't want to go to the details of that, but that's a kind of a prequel to the being discourse. It's about like how we make sense of everything, not just human being. But then this book, this discourse is more about how we make sense of people, how we can read ourselves, read and understand others, and interact with other people and collaborate and so on. So the the idea for me is like as I'm going to focus more on the sense making um, on one side and work on the philosophical aspect of this. Yeah. Also, on the other side, I'm so committed to work on contextualization of this. So we have some news and then we can update the people that are interested in this. But the idea is all of these conversations are going to be even further contextualized. Me working with the beautiful community of people I have around me, the people that are now expert in leveraging the being framework, and they all come from very diverse background. And some of them are social scientists from academia, some of them are psychologists, some of them are, they're coming from very, very different background. And they have different concerns. Like some, they have concerns around the issues women are dealing with in the world. Some of them are quite concerned with people with disability. You know, we have different people with different concerns. So the idea is to contextualize this further so that more and more groups of people can actually benefit from this body of work. And there are areas that I'm contextualizing my philosophical work in, like for example, in economy. So and there are, so yeah, so both on the philosophical aspect as well as contextualization of whatever I say so that it can make more sense and becomes more practical, as you said. Yeah, so these are the things that basically.
Yeah, thank you very much for this conversation. I'm very committed to continuing the Polish work, the polishers. I like that team. And thank you very much for the invitation and for you for hearing this conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I hope you have a great success with this book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.